There are moments when God does not answer you the way you thought He would. You prayed for a miracle, but what arrived looked like an interruption. You prayed for peace, but what entered your life disturbed the comfort you had learned to protect. You prayed for clarity, but what God allowed was a person who made you question the very path you were standing on. You prayed for an open door, but before the door opened, someone appeared who made you realize you had been knocking on the wrong one. And this is where many people miss God. They miss Him because they expect Him to move in a way that feels obvious. They expect the answer to look beautiful from the beginning. They expect the blessing to come dressed in comfort, certainty, approval, and immediate relief. But God does not always send transformation through the person you admire. He does not always send breakthrough through the person you already trust. He does not always send the word you need through the voice you prefer. Sometimes God sends the person you would have ignored. Sometimes He sends the person whose presence unsettles you. Sometimes He sends someone who does not fit your image of a helper, a teacher, a guide, or a messenger. Sometimes He sends someone who enters your life quietly, unexpectedly, almost inconveniently, and at first you do not understand why they are there. You may not call them a blessing, you may call them difficult, you may call them strange. You may call them too direct, you may call them a distraction, you may call them the wrong person at the wrong time, but later when your eyes open you realize they were not random, they were part of the answer. They were the vessel God used to disturb your stagnation. They were the unexpected person sent to change something in you before anything around you could change. Because sometimes the greatest miracle is not the person who comes to rescue you from your life. Sometimes the greatest miracle is the person who helps you see the part of your life you have been refusing to confront. Sometimes God does not send someone to make you comfortable. He sends someone to make you honest. He sends someone to show you where your peace has become passivity. He sends someone to reveal where your patience has become fear. He sends someone to expose where your loyalty has become limitation. He sends someone to awaken the gift you buried under disappointment. He sends someone to challenge the story you have been repeating about yourself. And at first it may feel uncomfortable, because divine disruption rarely feels gentle in the beginning. It feels like a disturbance, it feels like friction. It feels like a conversation you cannot forget. It feels like a sentence that follows you home. It feels like a question that keeps echoing in your spirit. It feels like a mirror being held in front of you when you were not ready to look. But God is not trying to embarrass you. He is trying to awaken you. He is not trying to shame you. He is trying to set you free from the version of yourself that learned how to survive but forgot how to grow. This is why you must be careful in this season. Be careful who you dismiss. Be careful who you judge too quickly. Be careful not to reject the vessel because the vessel does not look like your expectation. Be careful not to call something meaningless just because it does not arrive in the form you prayed for. Because the person God is sending may not enter your life with a crown. They may not arrive with a perfect smile, a perfect reputation, a perfect background, or a perfect understanding of your story. They may not even know God is using them. But through one conversation, one challenge, one act of kindness, one correction, one unexpected connection, or one moment of uncomfortable truth, God may use them to shift the direction of your life forever. This is not about worshiping people. This is not about becoming naive. This is not about believing every disruptive person is divine. No, this is about discernment. This is about learning to recognize when God is hiding a message inside an encounter you almost overlooked. This is about understanding that your breakthrough may not begin with the thing you receive. It may begin with the person who forces you to see what you have been unable to see. And that is why this message is personal. Because you have been waiting. You have been asking. You have been wondering when something will finally move. You have been trying to remain faithful while fighting the quiet fear that maybe nothing is changing. You have been carrying a prayer that has not yet become visible. And God is saying, I have seen you. I know where you are. I know what you asked me for. I know what you expected. But I also know what you need. And what you need may come through someone you did not expect. God speaks personally. I have seen where you are. God has seen where you are. Not only the version of you people see from the outside, not only the version that still shows up, still smiles, still works, still serves, still answers messages, still carries responsibility, still tells everyone, I am okay. God has seen the hidden version, the version that is tired, the version that has questions, the version that keeps replaying certain moments and wondering if you missed something, the version that lies awake thinking, how much longer will this season last? The version that feels like life is moving, but somehow you are not. God has seen that version of you. He has seen the prayers you did not post. He has seen the tears you wiped away before anyone entered the room. He has seen the disappointment you tried to spiritualize because you did not want to sound ungrateful. He has seen the moments when you praised him with your mouth while your heart whispered, God, I do not understand. And he has not turned away from you. You may feel unseen by people, but you are not unseen by God. You may feel misunderstood by people, but you are not misunderstood by God. You may feel delayed, overlooked, forgotten, or left behind, but God has not misplaced your life. Nothing about you is lost to him. Your waiting is not hidden. Your confusion is not hidden. Your exhaustion is not hidden. Your desire for change is not hidden. God has seen the place where you're standing now, and he knows exactly what this season has cost you. He knows what it cost you to keep believing when the evidence seemed thin. He knows what it cost you to remain kind when you were disappointed. He knows what it cost you to keep going when part of you wanted to stop caring. He knows what it cost you to watch other people step into things you had been praying for. He knows what it cost you to keep quiet when you wanted to ask, what about me? And now God is speaking to that hidden place, not the polished place, not the public place, not the place that knows how to perform strength, the hidden place. The place where you are honest, the place where you can admit that you are grateful but still tired, faithful but still confused, hopeful but still wounded, available but still afraid. And he is saying, I have seen you here. I have not ignored the delay. I have not forgotten the prayer. I have not wasted the years. I have not allowed this season without purpose. But you must understand something. The answer I am sending may not look like the answer you imagined. You may have expected a clear sign. You may have expected a sudden opportunity. You may have expected a familiar person to open the door. You may have expected the miracle to feel easy, gentle, and immediately comforting. But God may be preparing to send someone who does not soothe your old patterns, someone who does not reinforce the version of you that has become too comfortable in survival, someone who does not simply tell you what you want to hear, someone who will challenge the place where you have settled, someone who will speak to the part of you that still has not fully awakened. This is why God's personal message begins with seeing. Before he sends the person, he wants you to know that he knows where you are. Because if you do not trust that God sees you, you may misread the person he sends. You may think the disruption is rejection. You may think the challenge is punishment. You may think the discomfort means God is against you. But when you know God sees you, you can begin to ask a different question. Not, why is this happening to me? But, God, what are you showing me through this? Not, why did this person enter my life? But, what are you revealing through this encounter? Not, why does this feel uncomfortable? But, what part of me is being awakened? This is the beginning of discernment. When God speaks personally, he does not always begin by explaining everything. Sometimes he begins by reminding you that he sees. Because being seen by God gives you the courage to face what he is about to reveal. And what he may reveal is that your current life has become too small for your calling. Not evil, not meaningless, not completely wrong, just too small, too predictable, too controlled, too shaped by what disappointed you, too limited by what you learned to fear, too protected by routines that helped you survive but now keep you from expanding. You may have built a life that feels safe because you know how to manage it. You know the rhythm, you know the people, you know what to avoid. You know what not to hope for too loudly. You know where to keep your expectations low so you will not be hurt again. But safety is not always freedom. Sometimes safety is only a decorated cage. Sometimes the familiar place becomes dangerous, not because it destroys you suddenly, but because it slowly convinces you to stop expecting more. And when that happens, God may send a person to disturb the cage, not to hurt you, to awaken you, not to embarrass you, to call you out, not to condemn you, to remind you that there is still more life inside you than your current season has allowed you to express. This is why the unexpected person matters. They are not coming into a random life. They are coming into a life God has been watching, shaping, preparing, and calling forward. They are entering a story already known by heaven. And before you meet them, before you understand them, before you judge them, before you decide whether they are important, God says, I have seen where you are. I know what has become stagnant. I know what has become hidden. I know what has become delayed. I know what you have stopped saying out loud. And I am sending someone who may look ordinary, but whose presence will begin to move what has been stuck. Your waiting is validated. You are not forgotten in the delay. Waiting can make you question everything. It can make you question your timing. It can make you question your decisions. It can make you question whether you heard God correctly. It can make you question whether the dream was truly from Him or only something you wanted too much. Waiting can make even faithful people feel uncertain, because when you first begin waiting, you may have strength. You may say, I trust God. You may say, I know He has a plan. You may say, the door will open at the right time. But when the waiting becomes longer than expected, when the days turn into months, when the months turn into years, when the same prayer remains unanswered, when nothing visible seems to confirm what you believed in your spirit, waiting begins to touch deeper places. It touches your confidence. It touches your identity. It touches your ability to hope without protecting yourself. It touches your willingness to believe that God is still moving when life feels still. And sometimes the hardest part of waiting is not that nothing is happening. The hardest part is that other things are happening for other people. You see someone else move forward. You see someone else receive the call. You see someone else enter the relationship. You see someone else get the opportunity. You see someone else step into the door that looks like the one you have been praying for. And you try to be mature. You try to celebrate. You try to say, God bless them. But somewhere inside you whisper, Lord, I am tired of being happy for everyone else while wondering when my own life will change. God hears that too. He is not offended by your honesty. He is not surprised by the ache. He is not shocked the delay has been difficult for you. He knows waiting is not easy. He knows waiting can feel like standing between what was and what has not yet arrived. He knows waiting can make you feel suspended, as if you are living in a hallway with doors on both sides, but none of them opening. He knows that sometimes you do not need another person to tell you to be patient. You need to know that patience has not been pointless. And God says, you were not forgotten in the delay. The delay had work in it, hidden work, quiet work, deep work. The kind of work that does not always look impressive from the outside, but changes the foundation of who you are. In the delay, God was teaching you what you truly wanted. In the delay, He was revealing what you were tempted to settle for. In the delay, He was exposing the difference between a desire and an idol. In the delay, He was showing you where your trust was still attached to outcomes more than to Him. In the delay, He was allowing certain versions of you to grow tired enough to let go, because there are parts of us we only release when we become tired of carrying them. Sometimes we do not surrender pride because someone explains humility to us. We surrender pride because pride becomes too heavy. Sometimes we do not release control because someone tells us control is an illusion. We release control because control exhausts us. Sometimes we do not let go of the wrong expectation because we are wise from the beginning. We let go because the expectation keeps disappointing us until we finally ask God for something deeper than our own plan. Waiting has a way of purifying the request. At first you may pray, God, give me this. Then after a while you pray, God, show me what I really need. At first you may pray, God, open this door. Then later you pray, God, Give me the discernment to know whether this door is even mine. At first you may pray, God, change my circumstances. Then later you pray, God, change me so I do not carry the old version of myself into a new season. This is maturity, and much of it is formed in waiting. But the enemy often lies to people in waiting seasons. He tells you that waiting means God has forgotten you. He tells you that waiting means you are behind. He tells you that waiting means your time has passed. He tells you that waiting means you are less chosen, less loved, less seen, less valuable. He tells you that if God were really going to move, he would have moved by now. But heaven does not measure timing the way fear measures timing. Fear says, it is too late. God says, it is being prepared. Fear says, you missed it. God says, you are being aligned. Fear says, nothing is happening. God says, the roots are growing. Fear says, you are forgotten. You are hidden for a purpose. And sometimes, while you are hidden, God is preparing the person who will become part of your next movement. This is important, because you may think you are only waiting for an event, but God may be arranging an encounter. You may think you're waiting for a breakthrough, but God may be preparing the messenger who will reveal the breakthrough path. You may think you are waiting for an answer, but God may be preparing someone whose life, words, presence, or challenge becomes the answer. That person may not be ready yet. You may not be ready yet. The timing may not be aligned yet. The circumstances may not have reached the point where the encounter will have the intended impact. So God waits, not because he is careless, because he is precise. There are conversations that only change you when they happen at the right time. There are people you would not have listened to 5 years ago. There are truths you would have rejected before your heart was softened. There are corrections you would have called offensive before delay taught you humility. There are opportunities you would have mishandled before waiting shaped your character. This is why the delay matters. It has been preparing your ability to receive. Because the unexpected person God sends may not come with a soft message, they may not come to tell you everything is fine. They may come to show you where everything has become too familiar. They may come to speak to the area you have been avoiding. They may come to ask the question you did not want to face. They may come to expose a pattern you kept explaining away. And if you had met them earlier, you might have rejected them completely. But now, because waiting has done something in you, you may pause, you may listen, you may feel the discomfort, but not run from it. You may recognize that something about this encounter feels weightier than ordinary conversation. That is what waiting does. It makes you more sensitive to what matters. It strips away noise. It teaches you that not every important thing arrives loudly. It trains you to hear God in small moments, quiet interruptions, unexpected words, and unfamiliar people. So your waiting was not wasted. It was not empty time. It was not a divine oversight. It was the space where God was preparing your soul to recognize the person he would send. And when that person appears, you may finally understand that the delay was not keeping you from your future. It was preparing you to receive it without destroying it. Your expectation is challenged. The miracle will not come through the door. You keep watching. One of the reasons people miss God is because they become too loyal to their own expectations. They've already decided how God should answer. They've already imagined the form. They've already chosen the kind of person. They've already pictured the moment. They've already built the script. And when God moves outside that script, they do not recognize him. They say, that cannot be it. They say, that is not what I prayed for. They say, that person cannot be important. They say, this does not feel like a blessing. They say, God would not use that. But God has never been limited by the imagination of the people he loves. He is not trapped inside the picture you created. He is not obligated to use the door you keep watching. And this may be one of the most uncomfortable truths of spiritual growth. Sometimes your expectation becomes the very thing that blinds you. Expectation can give direction to hope, but when expectation hardens, it becomes control. You stop looking for God. You only look for your preferred version of his answer. You stop listening for truth. You only listen for confirmation. You stop being open to divine surprise. You only accept what fits the plan you already approved. But the future God has for you may be larger than the expectation you are protecting. That is why he challenges it. You may expect the miracle to come through someone successful, but God may send someone humble. You may expect the breakthrough to come through someone who admires you, but God may use someone who confronts you. You may expect clarity to come through a peaceful moment, but God may bring it through a difficult conversation. You may expect the answer to come from someone who understands your whole story, but God may use someone who only sees one thing clearly and says exactly what you need to hear. You may expect the blessing to feel like comfort, but God may send a disruption that becomes the doorway to freedom. This is difficult because people often confuse comfort with confirmation. They think if something feels comfortable, it must be right. They think if something feels uncomfortable, it must be wrong. But comfort is not always confirmation. Sometimes comfort only means nothing is being challenged. Sometimes comfort means your patterns are still protected. Sometimes comfort means your old identity is still in control. Sometimes comfort means you are staying in a familiar place because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. God knows this, so he sends someone who does not fit, someone outside your expected category, someone who makes you reconsider what you thought you knew, someone who does not let you hide behind the same explanation. Someone who interrupts the story you built around your fear, and immediately your expectation begins to resist. You think, why this person? You think, why now? You think, why does this bother me so much? You think, why can I not stop thinking about what they said? That last question matters, because sometimes the word that irritates you is the word that found the place where you were defended. Sometimes the sentence you cannot forget is the sentence God allowed to reach a hidden chamber in your heart. Sometimes the person you keep trying to dismiss is the person God is using to challenge your expectation. And here is the truth. The expected person may not have been able to reach you. The familiar voice may not have been able to move you. The comfortable environment may not have been able to awaken you. The people who already know you may have become too connected to the old version of you to call forth the new one. So God sends someone unexpected, someone with no investment in your old identity, someone who does not know how you have always done things, someone who is not impressed by the image you have maintained, someone who sees what others have stopped seeing, someone whose arrival breaks the pattern. This is why the miracle may not come through the door you keep watching, because the door you keep watching may represent an old expectation. The door you keep watching may be connected to your need for control. The door you keep watching may be the one that makes sense to your ego, but not to your calling. The door you keep watching may lead to a version of success that looks good, but does not heal you, stretch you, or align you. And while you are staring at that door, God may be opening another one through a person you almost ignored. A person who invites you into a different conversation. A person who asks you to consider a different path. A person who helps you see that what you wanted was not wrong, but it was incomplete. A person who makes you realize you were praying for relief when God wanted to give you transformation. This is where surrender becomes necessary. You must surrender not only your fear, you must surrender your preferred method of being blessed. That is harder than people admit, because sometimes we do not just want God's will. We want God's will delivered in a way that preserves our pride, protects our comfort, and validates our assumptions. But God loves you too much to only validate assumptions that are keeping you small. He will challenge the expectation that cannot carry your next season. He will confront the picture that has become too narrow. He will disrupt the pattern that has kept you circling the same mountain, and he may do it through someone you would not have chosen. That is why the prayer must change. Instead of saying only, God, send what I expect, you begin to pray, God, give me eyes to recognize what you send. Instead of saying only, God, open the door I want, you begin to pray, God, show me the door that is truly mine. Instead of saying only, God, comfort me, you begin to pray, God, change me, even if the process first makes me uncomfortable. That prayer is dangerous in the best way. because when you pray it honestly, you become available for divine disruption. You become open to the messenger in disguise. You become ready to recognize God in a person who does not look like the miracle, but carries the key to it. The disguised messenger appears, God sends someone you would not have chosen, then, often when you least expect it, the person appears. Not always dramatically, not always in a way that makes you immediately say, "This is God." Sometimes they appear as part of your ordinary life. A new co-worker, a stranger in a passing conversation, a person you meet through someone else, a neighbor, a client, a critic online, a voice from your past, a person you once overlooked, someone younger than you, someone older than you, someone who has nothing you thought you needed but somehow carries something your soul recognizes. They may not look impressive, they may not sound polished, they may not come with the credentials you respect, they may not belong to the kind of circle you usually trust. They may even be the kind of person you would normally avoid because something about them feels inconvenient to your current life. And yet, there they are, standing in your story, touching something, revealing something, interrupting something. At first, you may only notice the discomfort. You may notice that their presence bothers you. You may notice that their words challenge you. You may notice that they ask questions no one else asks. You may notice that they do not respond to you the way people usually respond. You may notice that something about them breaks the rhythm you had learned to control. This is often how a disguised messenger works. They do not always arrive to make you feel blessed. Sometimes they arrive to make you aware of your pride, aware of your fear, aware of your hidden longing, aware of your spiritual numbness, aware of the dream you keep pretending no longer matters, aware of the fact that you have been asking God for change while still protecting the habits that keep you unchanged. The disguised messenger may come with kindness. They may be someone who sees you at a moment when you feel invisible. They may say something simple, something almost small, but it reaches you deeply. They may say, "You seem tired." They may say, "You are stronger than you think." They may say, "You do not have to keep carrying this alone." They may say, "There is more in you than what you are showing." And for some reason, those words break through the walls. Not because the words are complicated, because they arrive at the right time, or the disguised messenger may come with correction. They may say something you do not want to hear. They may point out a pattern. They may challenge your excuse. They may ask why you keep delaying. They may tell you that you are hiding behind spirituality when God has already asked you for obedience. They may say, "You keep praying about what you already know you need to do," and you may feel offended, you may feel exposed, you may want to defend yourself, but later, when you are alone, the words return. They return because there is truth in them. They return because God is using them to reach a place you covered, or the disguised messenger may come through someone you underestimated, someone you thought had nothing to teach you. Someone without your education, your experience, your status, your language, your style, your circle. But then they say something with such purity, such honesty, such lived wisdom, that you are forced to confront the arrogance of your assumptions. You realize that wisdom does not always wear the clothing you expected. You realize that God can place treasure in vessels the world overlooks. You realize that your standard for who is worth listening to may have been too narrow, or the disguised messenger may come through someone difficult. This is the one people resist most, because no one likes to believe God could use a difficult person. But sometimes difficult people reveal what comfortable people never expose. A difficult person may reveal your impatience. A difficult person may reveal your need to control. A difficult person may reveal your inability to love people who do not make love easy. A difficult person may reveal that your peace is not as deep as you thought, because it disappears the moment someone does not act according to your preference. This does not mean you give unhealthy people unlimited access. It does not mean you ignore boundaries. It does not mean you call every toxic situation divine. Wisdom still matters. But even when someone is difficult, God can use the encounter to show you something about yourself. The message may not be, "Keep this person close." The message may be, "Look at what this reaction is revealing." The messenger may not be sent to stay. They may be sent to expose. And exposure is not always comfortable, but it can be holy when God uses it to heal. The disguised messenger may also appear as someone who opens a small door, not the grand opportunity you are waiting for, not the dramatic breakthrough, not the platform, promotion, invitation, or recognition you imagined, just a small door. A conversation that leads to another conversation, a simple suggestion, a name mentioned casually, a chance meeting, a small act of help, an introduction you almost ignore, a possibility that does not look big enough at first, and because you were expecting something larger, you may be tempted to dismiss it. But many big doors begin as small hinges. Many life-changing shifts begin as ordinary details. Many divine appointments look unimpressive until obedience reveals what was hidden inside them. This is why you must stay spiritually awake. The disguised messenger rarely arrives with a label. They will not always announce, "I am the person God is using to shift your life." They may not even know it. They may simply appear, speak, act, challenge, help, question, or disturb. And then something in you begins to move. That movement is the clue. Not obsession, not confusion, not unhealthy attachment, but a deep stirring, a sense that this encounter has weight, a sense that something was touched, a sense that God may be using this moment to bring something to the surface. Pay attention to that. Pay attention when a conversation stays with you longer than expected. Pay attention when someone's words reveal a truth you were avoiding. Pay attention when your irritation feels larger than the situation. Pay attention when a small act of kindness opens a place in you that has been closed. Pay attention when someone you almost dismissed carries insight you cannot deny. Pay attention when your spirit feels awakened, even if your comfort feels disturbed. Because this is often how God begins to change a life. Not by sending someone who fits every expectation, but by sending someone who interrupts the expectation itself. The disguised messenger appears and suddenly you are confronted with a choice. Will you judge the package before receiving the message? Will you reject the vessel because it does not look polished enough? Will you dismiss the person because they do not match your preference? Will you call the encounter meaningless because it did not arrive through the door you were watching? Or will you pause? Will you ask God for discernment? Will you listen beyond the surface? Will you recognize that the person standing in front of you may be carrying more than you first assumed? This is where part one must leave you. At the moment of recognition, the person has appeared, the disruption has begun. The comfort zone has been touched, the expectation has been challenged. And now your heart stands at the edge of a test. Because when God sends someone unexpected, the next question is not only who they are. The next question is who you become in response to them. Will you harden? Will you humble yourself? Will you judge? Will you discern? Will you protect the old version of your life? Or will you allow God to reveal the lesson hidden inside the encounter? The unexpected person is here. The divine disruption has entered your story. And what happens next will depend on whether you are willing to receive the message without being blinded by the messenger. Your judgment is tested. Will you reject the vessel before receiving the message? When the unexpected person appears, your first battle is rarely with them. It is with your own judgment. It is with the part of you that wants to decide too quickly. It is with the part of you that says, "This cannot be God because this does not look like what I expected." It is with the part of you that measures people by appearance, status, tone, background, convenience, and familiarity before asking whether God may be using them to reveal something deeper. This is where the test begins. Because it is one thing to say, "God, use anyone." It is another thing to actually receive a message from someone you would not have chosen. It is one thing to pray, "God, speak to me." It is another thing to hear truth through a voice that irritates your pride. It is one thing to ask for transformation. It is another thing to accept the person God uses to expose the parts of you that still resist transformation. This is why the unexpected person becomes a test. Not because they are perfect, not because they are always easy, not because everything they say is automatically right, but because their presence reveals something about your heart. They reveal how quickly you judge. They reveal what kind of people you believe God is allowed to use. They reveal whether you truly want truth or only truth delivered in a package that makes you comfortable. They reveal whether your discernment is spiritual wisdom or only disguised preference. And there is a difference. Preference says, I do not like the way this person came, so I reject everything. Discernment says, God, what is true here and what is not. Preference says, this person is not impressive enough for me to listen. Discernment says, wisdom can come through humble places. Preference says, this makes me uncomfortable, so it must not be from God. Discernment says, some discomfort is the beginning of growth. Preference says, I only receive correction from people I already respect. Discernment says, if there is truth here, let me not miss it because of pride. This is where many people lose the message. They reject the vessel before they ever examine the message. They look at the person's weakness and say, God could not use them. They look at the person's background and say, they have nothing to teach me. They look at the person's lack of status and say, why would I listen? They look at the person's tone and say, because they did not say it the way I wanted. I will ignore what was said. But sometimes the truth comes wrapped in a delivery. You must mature enough to separate from your ego. This does not mean you accept disrespect. This does not mean you surrender your boundaries. This does not mean you blindly obey every person who challenges you. This does not mean you call manipulation divine. No. God never asks you to abandon wisdom, but He does ask you to abandon pride, and pride is subtle. Pride does not always sound arrogant. Sometimes pride sounds like, I already know. Sometimes pride sounds like, that person cannot help me. Sometimes pride sounds like, I do not need to hear this. Sometimes pride sounds like, if God wanted to speak to me, He would send someone more qualified. Sometimes pride sounds like, I am too far along to learn from someone like that. But God often sends truth through unlikely vessels because unlikely vessels expose pride more quickly than impressive ones. When someone impressive speaks, you may listen because their image flatters your ego. When someone respected speaks, you may listen because their status makes the message easier to accept. When someone polished speaks, you may listen because the package feels safe. But when someone overlooked speaks, when someone ordinary speaks, when someone imperfect speaks, when someone you did not expect speaks, then the real condition of your heart begins to show. Will you listen because it is true? Or will you reject it because it did not come through status? This is the test. And sometimes the person God sends will not only test your judgment of them, they will test your judgment of yourself. Because some people enter your life and reveal the story you have been telling about yourself, you may think you are humble until someone unlikely corrects you. You may think you are patient until someone difficult slows you down. You may think you are compassionate until someone inconvenient needs your attention. You may think you are healed until someone's words touch an old wound. You may think you are open until God sends truth through a person outside your preferred circle. Then suddenly you see yourself, not the version you present, not the version you explain, not the version you wish were true, the real version, the version that still wants control, the version that still wants to be admired, the version that still wants God to move, but only in ways that do not embarrass your expectations. This is not condemnation, this is revelation. God allows the unexpected person to reveal what comfort has concealed, and when this happens, you have a choice. You can become defensive, or you can become discerning. You can say, this is not for me, and run back into the old pattern. Or you can pause and say, God, why did this affect me so deeply? That question is powerful. Why did this affect me? Why did their words disturb me? Why did their correction make me angry? Why did their presence expose insecurity? Why did I feel the need to prove myself? Why did I dismiss them so quickly? Why did I assume they had nothing to offer? Why did this ordinary encounter feel spiritually heavy? These questions open the door to growth. Because the unexpected person is not always sent to give you a complete answer. Sometimes they are sent to ask the question that unlocks the answer. They may not explain your whole future. They may not understand your entire calling. They may not even know the full weight of what they said. But one question, one comment, one challenge, one interruption can become the doorway to self-examination. And self-examination is often the beginning of freedom. Many people want freedom without examination. They want breakthrough without exposure. They want healing without honesty. They want growth without discomfort. They want God to change their lives while allowing them to keep every old defense intact. But God loves you too much for that. So he sends someone who presses against the defense, someone who challenges the story, someone who does not cooperate with your old way of avoiding truth, someone who becomes a mirror. And when you look into that mirror, you may not like everything you see at first. You may see fear, you may see pride, you may see resentment. You may see passivity. You may see the part of you that has been waiting for rescue while refusing responsibility. You may see the part of you that wants destiny but resists discipline. You may see the part of you that asks for guidance but avoids correction. This is where humility must enter. Humility does not say, everything this person says is right. Humility says, God, I am willing to see what is true. Humility does not remove discernment, it purifies it. Humility allows you to separate the message from the messenger's imperfection. Humility allows you to receive a lesson without idolizing the person. Humility allows you to acknowledge discomfort without running from it. Humility allows you to say, even if this person is not perfect, maybe you are showing me something through this encounter. That kind of humility is rare, but it is necessary. Because the next season of your life may require a version of you that is less defensive, less judgmental, less controlled by appearances, and more sensitive to how God moves. The person God sends may not fit your image, but if you humble yourself, you may discover that their presence was the test that prepared you for the lesson, and the lesson is where the real transformation begins. The lesson is revealed. The person was sent to expose what you could not see alone. At some point, the encounter begins to make sense. Not immediately, not always in the moment. Sometimes, while the person is speaking, you only feel tension. Sometimes, while the situation is unfolding, you only feel confusion. Sometimes, while the disruption is happening, you only want it to end. But later, in the quiet, something begins to settle. A sentence comes back. A question returns. A memory rises. A truth becomes harder to avoid. And suddenly you realize the person was not sent merely to enter your life. They were sent to reveal something, something hidden, something ignored, something delayed. Something God had been trying to show you, but you could not see it while surrounded by the familiar. This is the purpose of the unlikely encounter. The person may not be the miracle itself. They may be the one who reveals why you could not recognize the miracle. They may not be the door. They may be the one who points to the door. They may not be the destination. They may be the catalyst. A catalyst does not always stay. A catalyst does not always receive credit. A catalyst may appear briefly, disturb what was settled, create a reaction, and then move on. But after the catalyst comes, nothing remains exactly the same. That is what this person may be in your life. A catalyst. Someone who exposes what you could not see alone. Maybe they expose your fear. You thought you were being wise. You thought you were waiting for the right time. You thought you were being careful. But this person's words or example suddenly show you that fear has been wearing the costume of wisdom. You realize you were not waiting because God said wait. You were waiting because moving forward would require courage. You were not delaying because the door was closed. You were delaying because obedience would make you visible. You were not being patient. You were hiding. And that realization may sting, but it also frees you. Because once fear is exposed, it can no longer control you in the same hidden way. Or maybe the person exposes your pride. You thought you were confident. You thought you had standards. You thought you knew who was worth listening to. But then God used someone you underestimated, someone without the appearance you respect, to speak a truth you could not deny. And you had to face it. You had to admit that maybe your idea of wisdom had become too connected to image. You had to admit that maybe you were more impressed by status than surrender. You had to admit that maybe you had been overlooking people God valued. You had to admit that your judgment had become too fast, too sharp, too self-protective. That exposure is painful, but it is holy. Because pride cannot be healed while it remains unnamed. Or maybe the person exposes your exhaustion. They say one simple thing, and suddenly your strength cracks. Not because you are weak, but because you've been carrying too much for too long. They ask, "Are you okay?" And for some reason you cannot perform the answer. You cannot pretend. You cannot say, "I am fine," with the same confidence. Something in you realizes that you have been functioning but not healing, moving but not resting, serving but not receiving, praying but not being honest about how tired you are. And through that person, God shows you that you do not need to keep proving you are strong by refusing to be human. Maybe the person exposes your calling. This can be one of the most powerful forms of divine disruption. They see something in you that you buried. They name something you stopped naming. They remind you of something God placed inside you before disappointment taught you to shrink. They say, "You are supposed to do more than this." They say, "Why are you hiding?" They say, "You keep pretending you are content, but I can tell something in you is still waiting to be released." They say, "There is a gift in you that you have not stewarded." And suddenly the dream moves, not loudly, but enough. Enough to remind you that it is not dead. Enough to remind you that you did not imagine it. Enough to remind you that the delay did not cancel the calling. Some people are sent not to give you a new dream, but to resurrect the one you buried. Or maybe the person exposes a relationship pattern. They show you how often you overgive, how often you stay silent, how often you accept less than what is healthy because you fear loss, how often you call dysfunction loyalty. How often you confuse being needed with being loved. How often you stay connected to people who drain you because you do not know who you are without being useful. And through this exposure, God does not shame you. He invites you into freedom. He shows you that love is not the same as self-erasure. He shows you that compassion does not require the destruction of your own peace. He shows you that some connections must be redefined before your next season can breathe. Or maybe the person exposes your spiritual numbness. You have still been using the right words, still attending the right places, still saying the right things, still presenting yourself as faithful, but inside, your fire has been low. Your prayers have become routine. Your expectation has become cautious. Your obedience has become selective. Your heart has become protected. Then someone enters your life with hunger, boldness, honesty, or conviction, and suddenly you realize how numb you have become. Their presence does not condemn you. It awakens you. It reminds you that you were not created to live spiritually half awake. It reminds you that your relationship with God is not meant to become a script you recite without fire. It reminds you that there is still depth available, still intimacy available, still obedience available, still surrender available, still more. This is why the lesson matters more than the messenger, because if you focus only on the person, you may become distracted by their flaws. You may obsess over their role. You may wonder whether they will stay. You may become attached to the vessel. You may become offended by the vessel. You may make the encounter about personality when God wanted to make it about revelation. But when you focus on the lesson, you begin to ask better questions. What did God show me? What did this encounter reveal? What pattern became visible? What truth did I resist? What fear did I recognize? What part of me awakened? What step became clear? What old expectation broke? What new obedience is required? These questions turn disruption into transformation. Without these questions, the encounter remains only an emotional event. With these questions, the encounter becomes a turning point, and God wants turning points. He does not send people merely to stir your emotions. He sends them to move your life toward alignment. Alignment with truth. Alignment with calling, alignment with humility, alignment with courage, alignment with the version of you He has been forming in secret. This is why some people enter your life like a key. They do not open every door. They open one locked place in you, one memory, one truth, one decision, one hidden desire, one buried courage, one wounded place, one unspoken prayer, and once that place opens, your life begins to rearrange. Not because the person controls your destiny, but because God used the encounter to unlock something that had been closed. The lesson is the key. Receive it. Do not worship the person. Do not reject the person too quickly. Do not cling to the encounter. Do not turn the messenger into an idol. Do not throw away the lesson because the vessel was imperfect. Receive what God is revealing. Let the truth do its work. Let the mirror show what needs to be seen. Let the question remain long enough to change you. Let the correction mature you. Let the kindness soften you. Let the challenge awaken you. Because once the lesson is received, the new reality begins to open. Your new reality opens. Once you receive the lesson, the door begins to move. A new reality does not always open with noise. Sometimes it opens quietly. It opens the moment you stop defending the old pattern. It opens the moment you admit the truth. It opens the moment you say, God, I see it now. It opens the moment you stop calling fear wisdom. It opens the moment you stop projecting correction. It opens the moment you stop waiting for the messenger to be perfect before receiving the lesson. It opens the moment you choose obedience over comfort. This is how life changes. Not always all at once, not always visibly at first, but deeply. The first door that opens is often internal. Your perception changes. You no longer see the waiting as wasted. You see it as preparation. You no longer see the unexpected person as merely difficult. You see that God used the encounter to expose something necessary. You no longer see discomfort as automatically negative. You understand that some discomfort is the sound of an old limitation breaking. You no longer see yourself as stuck in the same way. You recognize that movement has begun. And once your perception changes, your decisions begin to change. You begin to move differently. You stop delaying what God already told you to do. You stop begging for clarity where obedience is already clear. You stop asking people to validate what God has already confirmed. You stop allowing old fear to narrate your future. You stop dismissing small doors because they do not look impressive. You stop judging people only by how they appear. You begin to listen deeper. You begin to move with more humility. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to discern instead of assume. You begin to act on the lesson. This is critical. The lesson must become action. Many people receive powerful messages and still remain unchanged because they let the message become only emotion. They cry, they feel inspired, they say, that was for me. They recognize that God spoke. But then they return to the same pattern, the same avoidance, the same fear, the same judgment, the same comfort zone, the same hesitation, the same old explanation, that is only a moment. God does not send the unexpected person merely to give you a moment. He sends them to begin a movement from fear into courage, from pride into humility, from delay into obedience, from judgment into discernment, from numbness into awareness, from stagnation into growth, from survival into purpose. So when the lesson becomes clear, move, not recklessly, not emotionally, not to prove something, but with obedience. If God used the person to expose fear, take the courageous step. If God used the person to expose pride, practice humility. If God used the person to expose exhaustion, receive rest and support. If God used the person to expose a buried gift, begin stewarding it again. If God used the person to expose an unhealthy pattern, stop calling the pattern normal. If God used the person to expose judgment, begin looking at people with new eyes. If God used the person to expose a door, stop standing outside it. Movement matters, because revelation without response becomes regret. You may look back later and realize that God showed you the truth, but you did nothing with it. Do not let that happen. Do not let the encounter become another memory that never became obedience. Do not let the messenger's words become something you quote but never live. Do not let the disruption fade without allowing it to change your direction. This is your moment to respond. The new reality opens when you cooperate with what God revealed. And as you cooperate, you may begin to see signs of change. You may feel courage in places where you once felt only hesitation. You may feel peace after making a decision you avoided. You may feel grief as you release an old identity, but beneath the grief there is freedom. You may feel uncertain, but not trapped. You may feel stretched, but not abandoned. You may feel challenged, but strangely alive. That aliveness matters, because sometimes your spirit knows when you have stepped out of stagnation before your circumstances have caught up. The outside may still look similar, the same room, the same responsibilities, the same people, the same calendar, but something inside you is different. You are no longer asleep in the pattern. You are no longer fully owned by the fear. You're no longer waiting passively for life to happen to you. You are participating with God. You are awake, you are moving, you are becoming, and the person God sent was part of that awakening. They did not save you, God did. They did not become your source, God is. They did not control your future, God holds it, but they played a role. They became the unexpected voice, mirror, question, challenge, kindness, correction, or doorway that helped you step into a new awareness. Honor that, honor the lesson, honor the God who sent it, then keep walking. Because the new reality is not only about what opens around you, it is about who opens within you. The version of you who can now receive correction without collapsing. The version of you who can see people beyond appearance. The version of you who can move without needing every detail. The version of you who can release old comfort for new obedience. The version of you who can be interrupted without becoming offended. The version of you who can recognize God in unlikely places. That version is emerging. And once that version emerges, your life cannot remain the same. You become a messenger too. Now God will send you into someone else's story. Then comes the deeper revelation. The unexpected person was not only sent to change your life, they were sent to teach you how God uses people. And once you understand that, you begin to realize something humbling. You may become the unexpected person in someone else's life. You may become the messenger. You may become the voice. You may become the mirror. You may become the helper. You may become the person God places in someone's path at the exact moment they need to hear, see, receive, or confront something. This is the cycle of divine transformation. God sends someone to awaken you. Then he uses the awakened version of you to reach someone else. He comforts you so you can comfort. He corrects you so you can speak truth with humility. He restores you so your story can become evidence of his mercy. He opens your eyes so you can help someone else see. He sends a messenger to you, and then he makes you available as a messenger for another. But this requires humility. Because becoming a messenger does not mean becoming self-important. It does not mean assuming every thought you have is a word from God. It does not mean forcing advice into every situation. It does not mean correcting people from pride. It does not mean entering someone's life like you are their savior. A true messenger knows they are only a vessel. A true messenger does not point people back to themselves. A true messenger points people back to God. A true messenger speaks with weight but walks with humility. A true messenger knows the difference between obedience and ego. A true messenger understands that words can heal or harm, awaken or crush, guide or confuse. So if God uses you, let him use you with tenderness. Let him use you with wisdom. Let him use you with clean hands and a humble heart. Because someone may be in the season you were just in, someone may be waiting, someone may be tired, someone may be silently asking God for a sign, someone may be trapped in stagnant comfort and not know how to name it, someone may be carrying a dream they no longer speak about, someone may be mistaking fear for wisdom, someone may be one conversation away from courage. And God may send you, not because you are perfect, not because you know everything, not because you have never struggled, but because you have been changed. Because you know what it feels like to be awakened by an unexpected person. because you know what it feels like to almost reject the messenger, because you know what it feels like for truth to arrive in a way that challenges pride, because you know what it feels like to be seen by God in a hidden place. Your experience becomes part of your assignment. Your waiting becomes compassion. Your disruption becomes wisdom. Your lesson becomes language. Your humility becomes safety for others. Your obedience becomes a path someone else can recognize. This is why God wastes nothing. He does not waste the waiting. He does not waste the discomfort. He does not waste the conversation. He does not waste the person who interrupted your life. He does not waste the lesson that came through them. Everything can become seed, and one day your life may become the place where someone else finds courage, not because you preach loudly, not because you perform spirituality, not because you force meaning into every moment, but because you are available. Availability is powerful. A simple word spoken at the right time can become a lifeline of hope. A simple act of kindness can remind someone that God sees them. A simple question can awaken a decision. A simple testimony can help someone believe their story is not over. A simple moment of honesty can break the power of shame. A simple invitation can open a door. A simple refusal to judge can make someone feel safe enough to heal. You may never know the full impact. The person God used in your life may not know the full impact they had on you. They may have walked away thinking it was just a conversation, just a meeting, just a disagreement, just a moment. But heaven knew. And one day the same may be true of you. You may say something and never know that someone carried it for years. You may encourage someone and never know that it helped them take the next step. You may challenge someone and never know that it broke a cycle. You may show kindness and never know that it arrived on the day they felt forgotten. You may open a small door and never know that it led to a life-changing path. That is why you must stay sensitive. Do not underestimate ordinary obedience. Do not underestimate quiet kindness. Do not underestimate a word spoken with love. Do not underestimate your story. Do not underestimate the wisdom God has formed in you through seasons you did not understand. The person God sends to you changes how you see your own role in the world. You stop living only as someone waiting to receive. You begin living as someone willing to be sent, and that is maturity. A spiritually mature person does not only ask, God, who are you sending to help me? They also ask, God, who are you asking me to help? Not from pressure, not from performance, not from pride, but from availability. Because once God awakens you, He often sends you. Final activation, stay awake, because the encounter carries a door. Now hear this clearly. The person God is sending may already be closer than you think. They may already be in your life. They may have already spoken. They may have already challenged you. They may have already offered a kindness you dismissed as ordinary. They may have already asked a question that stayed in your spirit. They may have already exposed something you did not want to see. And perhaps you've been trying to decide whether the encounter mattered. Perhaps you've been trying to move on from it. Perhaps you've been telling yourself it was random. Perhaps you've been focusing so much on the person's imperfection that you have not asked God what the lesson was. But today, God is calling your attention back, not to make you obsessed with the person, not to make you chase the messenger, not to make you build your life around a human being, but to make you recognize the message. What did God reveal? What did He expose? What did He awaken? What did He challenge? What did He confirm? What did He ask you to release? What did He ask you to begin? What door did the encounter point toward? Do not waste the disruption. Do not waste the discomfort. Do not waste the conversation that carried more weight than you understood at first. God may have hidden a door inside that encounter, but you must be willing to see it. The door may be a new decision. The door may be a healed perspective. The door may be a courageous act. The door may be a boundary. The door may be forgiveness. The door may be a calling you need to return to. The door may be the end of an old pattern. The door may be the beginning of a new assignment. The door may not look dramatic at first, but if God is in it, even a small door can lead to a wide place, so stay awake. Stay awake when someone unexpected enters your life. Stay awake when your first reaction is judgment. Stay awake when discomfort rises. Stay awake when a simple word feels too timely. Stay awake when a small opportunity appears. Stay awake when your old assumptions are challenged. Stay awake when God uses someone you would not have chosen, because the unexpected person may be carrying more than you think. They may be carrying a mirror. They may be carrying a key. They may be carrying a warning. They may be carrying confirmation. They may be carrying a question that unlocks a future. They may be carrying the disruption your stagnant season needed. And if you receive the lesson, your life can begin to move. Not because the person has power over you, but because God used them to awaken what He placed within you. This is the message. You have not been forgotten. Your waiting has not been wasted. Your expectation is being challenged because your future is bigger than your preferred picture. The person God sends may not look like the miracle, but they may carry the key to your transformation. Do not judge too quickly. Do not reject the vessel too soon. Do not confuse discomfort with danger. Do not confuse humility with weakness. Do not confuse discernment with pride. Do not confuse the messenger with the source. Receive what is from God. Release what is not. Take the lesson, walk through the door, and become available for the next assignment. Because one day you will look back and understand the person who interrupted you was part of your becoming. The conversation you could not forget was part of your awakening. The discomfort you wanted to avoid was part of your freedom. The mirror you resisted was part of your healing. The challenge you almost rejected was part of your calling. And the messenger you nearly dismissed was one of the ways God chose to answer your prayer. So prepare your heart. The unexpected person is not coming to entertain your comfort. They're coming to help unlock your future. They may arrive quietly, they may arrive suddenly, they may arrive through kindness, they may arrive through correction, they may arrive through a small door. They may arrive through a conversation that seems ordinary until your spirit recognizes its weight. But when they arrive, ask God for eyes to see, ask for ears to hear, ask for humility to receive, ask for wisdom to discern, ask for courage to act. And ask for a heart that does not miss divine purpose because it was hidden in an unexpected person. God is still sending messengers. God is still arranging encounters. God is still placing keys in unlikely hands. God is still using overlooked people to deliver life-changing truth. God is still disrupting comfort to release destiny. And this time, when He sends the person, you will not be asleep. You will not judge too quickly. You will not worship the messenger. You will not ignore the message. You will pause. You will listen. You will discern. You will receive. You will move. And then, when the lesson has changed you, God will send you into someone else's story. Not as the hero, not as the source, not as the savior, but as a vessel, a witness, a messenger, an unexpected person carrying something God can use. Because the same God who sent someone to change your life can now use your life to change someone else's. Stay awake. The encounter is not random. The disruption is not wasted. The lesson is not small. The door is beginning to move. And the person God sends may change your life forever.